ears.
No, do I?
No.
Oh, you look like Aaron with the glasses. It's beautiful.
Oh, okay.
Tim, did I not know you were a fitter?
Yeah.
I did not know you
Oh, you did?
I did.
Oh, I didn't mention it while we were talking.
I don't think so. I thought you were talking about dogs.
The cast
so-
is so
Oh, yeah.
large. People.
Well, that's exciting. I'm excited to see it. Or not it.
I'm not.
You are not. Okay, cool. It's
not
just
a-
happening near your place of work.
Yeah.
And by near, I mean in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not a show that I'm like.
Me too, me too,
about
me
it.
too. That's why I wanted to.
You guys, everyone ready?
sit
I've
back and
seen
watch.
or done it already.
All good?
We all ready?
Times.
Yes.
You all ready for this?
All right.
Saturday?
All right. Thank you for coming to the reading of Shadows in the Fog.
Mhm.
I'm Alex Stradling, Executive Director of Falls Area Community Television. Most of you guys know me. Some of you guys don't. But this script was written by Josh Morelli. A portion of it by myself, and this is a script that we are and another script developing for a community film project that we're going to be moving forward in the next couple of years. So we thank the Wild Goose Players, David, Morgana, for allowing us to read the script, and to be able to hear it, and to be able to get some feedback from some folks. So we really appreciate that.
Yeah, don't hold
And
back
your
on the
support.
feedback if anybody has any.
He's
really
careful.
He's ready.
Trust me, man. I've heard the worst of it.
Okay.
We certainly don't hold back here at Falls Area Community College.
Very true.
All right, great. Shadows in the Fog. So I'll be narrating. Josh and I will be switching up. It's a screenplay, so there is a lot of narration. So, all right, Shadows in the Fog. We open up on a house bathed in flames. Smoke drifts in the warm summer night as it burns. A young boy, David Camp, stands witness on a dusty road in front of chaos. His face has no expression as he stares into the fire. The flames reflect in his eyes as ash slowly rises and eventually fades into the cold black sky above. Superimposed titles: Westwood, Colorado, 1993. Cut to black. Cut to the bar. Outside the Horse and Cable Bar, soft flakes of snow drift to the ground. Titles: 20 years later. Each one carries aloft by a gentle breeze from the cool night air. There's a stillness to the scene, captured like a perfect photograph, until suddenly a door swings open to the bar. Then a man is shoved outside. The man, David, 29, Caucasian, with messy brown hair and bags under his eyes, like he's forever exhausted, stumbles and is thrown outside the bar as he staggers forward, clearly intoxicated.
At least let me finish my drink, for Christ's sakes.
The bartender, Tucker, a large, burly man with a beard, who shoves him out the door, follows David outside, shouting and pointing his finger.
Nah, I'm sick of this shit. You're done.
David suddenly looks scared. He can't lose this place. It's the only one left in town he can still go to.
Oh, come on, don't say that. I'm sorry, okay? It won't happen again. I swear.
Bullshit. I'm over this. Find someplace else to drink. As of tomorrow, your name's on the wall.
Looking inside, past Tucker, and knowing where the wall is and how desperately he needs this place, he is terrified. Tucker turns around without another word and begins to head back inside. Seeing this, David lunges forward, grabbing his arm, desperate to stop him.
Wait, man, please. You know I get stupid when I drink. I overreacted.
Get off of me.
This causes David to stumble again and falls to the ground. Tucker then stands over him as he finishes speaking.
I'm not dealing with this anymore. David, you're done. Don't come back again.
Before David can respond, Tucker turns away and shuts the door behind him, leaving David in the cold. He stares at the closed door, then looks down at the wet stain on his shirt, spilled with alcohol, and shuts his eyes.
Shit.
David staggers down the road, shoving his hands in his pockets to keep warm. As he stumbles along, he pulls out his flask. He takes the cap off and starts drinking while sucking down a mouthful of whiskey. He enters the parking lot where his truck is. As it comes into view in the distance, a noise catches his attention. It's somewhere nearby, like a bottle rolling on the cement, or a whisper on the wind. Eerie noises that cause David to grow unsettled. Close on the rims of David's car, sitting in the rims in the car, and in the dark, sitting. It looks to be like it's watching David in the background. The car is hidden from sight. Back to David. David moves a little faster to get to his vehicle. Once there, he unlocks it and gets inside. Sitting in the driver's seat, he shuts the door and removes the cigarette from his pack on the passenger seat while shaking his head.
This fucking town.
He sparks his lighter to life, ready to light the smoke, but before he can, he spots something on the passenger window. Holding off on the cigarette, he starts the ignition, turns on his overhead light in the truck, and once the vehicle is illuminated, David can see a black circle drawn on the window, with cracks emanating from the center outward on the glass, like a hole in the ice.
What the hell?
As David leans in to get a closer look, something catches his attention. Blue lights start to flash. They reflect in his rear view. Instinctively, David covers his eyes from the bright lights as he turns around to look. The hidden car watching him turns out to be a police cruiser. Later, frozen lake night. Several lights are buzzing with light at this point, like a spotlight at the surface of a frozen lake. An obnoxiously loud generator hums and growls nearby as a well-dressed man, Aaron, through his face is not seen, approaches. His face, obscured by shadows created from the spotlight, is never fully revealed as he steps into frame. He holds a small, strange-looking artifact in one hand, the obsidian symbol. As he gets down on his knees, he hovers the hand holding the artifact slowly over the ice, while repeating one verse over and over in a strange language.
Gift, Yaago, Arguar, Aden, Gift.
He continues to repeat the words, keeping pace with his hands as he waves the idol back and forth. Suddenly, he stops, staring down deep into the ice. In the ice, where Aaron is staring, closer and closer, until suddenly, an inky blackness slithers beneath the ice. Cut to title card. The music rises. Harsh, dissonant tones play out. As shadows in the fog is painted across the screen in long, stringy lines. The words linger for a time, fading in and out like a thin wisp of smoke, evidently following the music as they both crescendo and then fade away. The music ends. Cut to interior county jail, night. The dark interior of the cell is sparsely populated, housing nothing more than a toilet, steel bars, and filthy mattress. The room is deathly quiet, with the exception of a quiet television playing somewhere down the hall. A battered old CRTV sitting on a shelf as two men, a deputy and a sheriff, walk past the frame. On the TV, a man, a self-help guru, Aaron Caldwell, sits in the chair, dressed to the nines. He is the distinguished guest of the talk show playing on the TV. The show is halfway over, and Aaron is in the middle of speaking.
That's the thing about us, Jack. Our species doesn't like the big questions. We want the easy answers, the cheat sheet. And that's okay. But that's what I want people to understand. I can give them that. I can help them feel at ease.
Back to scene. David lays prostrate on his bed, his eyes closed while he suffers through a vicious hangover. He only perks up slightly when he hears footsteps approaching through the bars. As David turns to look, he hears a buzz. The noise sounds as the door from the hallway outside the holding cell opens. This is followed by two officers stepping on screen, a younger one and an older one.
Give me a second with him.
The younger officer, Turner, nods, stepping back into the hallway in compliance. As the older officer steps forward, David gets off the bed and walks up to the bars.
How you doing, David?
Oh, you know, Don, keeping out of trouble.
I can see that. You know the state starts to put its foot down a bit after you get a couple of these. Hence the charge.
And the bail?
Yeah, you really dug yourself a hole this time.
I'm not worried about it. It's all a bad joke at this point anyway.
How so?
Well, first I lost the best job I've had in months, and now it looks like I'll be losing my truck, too.
If that's a joke, I don't get it. How is it funny?
It's not.
Do it to yourself. You must have figured that out by now.
Don't hold a slip up now and then against me.
God damn it, David. Can't you take this serious for 1 second?
Sorry, it's just hard. Never feels like I can catch a break.
I know. You've had a rough ride, but you definitely didn't do yourself any favors tonight.
Won't argue that.
Listen, I have a better memory than most people in this town. I know what happened. Well, it was a tragedy, but you can't keep letting it control your life. You're smart enough to realize at some point it just becomes an excuse.
David looks away. He then stands up a little wobbly and smiles as he grips the bars.
Anyone ever tell you you're smarter than you look, Don?
My wife. Then her eyes ain't too good anymore.
Suddenly, there's a knock. The sound comes from the nearby wall. Sheriff Donovan quickly turns to look and see. Deputy Turner sticking his head around the corner.
You all set, Sheriff?
Yeah, we're all set.
Locking his eyes with him, the sheriff tries a final approach as he pulls out his notepad.
Hey, don't forget our appointment this afternoon. And try to remember,
The sheriff marks something down in his notepad while still keeping his eye on David.
if you live your life stuck in the past, you'll never get to have any kind of a future.
Yeah, thanks to Cart. I'll write that down.
You do that.
The sheriff gestures for the other officers to unlock the door and then moves towards the exit way. But he stops as the door squeaks open, turning back for one final word to Deputy Turner.
Take him down to sign his release forms.
Someone paid my bail?
Deputy Turner starts looking through his keys for the right ones. The sheriff leaves as Deputy Turner moves towards David.
Sure did. About an hour ago.
Who?
Couldn't tell you. They didn't give a name.
David turns quickly at the answer, looking puzzled, but shies away from the bright lights as he steps into the hallway and off screen. Cut to Interior County Jail, front office, night. David is standing at the window, waiting to collect his things from Deputy Turner. There's an awkward silence between them as Deputy Turner finishes his forms. Eventually, he looks up from his keyboard to face David.
All right. Once you confirm everything here's yours, should be all set.
Turner pushes a plastic container with David's possessions towards him. David takes it. Then Turner looks back at his list, checking them off as he goes. He starts to read.
One jacket, cell phone, a pair of sneakers, wallet, 87 cents worth of assorted change, and one silver-plated flask.
David is frantically looking through his belongings as the officer speaks. Deputy Turner begins to turn away, assuming they're finished, when David pipes up.
My lighter?
Turner turns back to face him, acting surprised.
Sorry?
David looks up frantically, clearly concerned.
My lighter. It's not here.
Deputy Turner shrugs at the loss.
It's everything that was on your detainment list.
I can count the number of people who might have touched it on one hand. Are you seriously going to sit there and tell me you got lost while I was in holding?
What exactly are you trying to say, Camp?
Let me put it a little simpler. If I was missing 4 fucking fingers, I'm pretty sure I'd still have a good idea who had it.
Sheriff Donovan sticks his head around the corner, overhearing the commotion.
Is there a problem in there?
Deputy Turner turns, looks at the sheriff, and quickly changes his tune.
No, sir. No problem.
Yeah, just some slippery fingers. Nothing that can't be remedied.
Turner looks back to David, a glint of obvious irritation in his eyes.
Let me just take another look.
After turning his back to David, he appears to look through a different plastic tub of evidence. Then, several moments later, he turns back with a lighter in hand.
Is this what you were looking for?
Yep, I knew it'd turn up.
Wrong buckets, all.
Sheriff Donovan looks at them both sternly.
That drama resolved then, gentlemen?
Yep, I'm leaving, don't worry.
Glad to hear it.
David grabs the rest of his things and turns to leave. As Donovan heads back the way he came, when suddenly, Deputy Turner calls out to David as he nears the door.
Camp!
David turns back, looking at the officer as he's digging in his desk.
I forgot. The person who bailed you out. I left this for you.
He stops digging and looks up, holding out a card, solid black and white, numbers written across it. David slowly makes his way back to the counter and takes the card. As he grips it, he makes eye contact with Turner.
They said to call as soon as possible.
David looks down at the card. The card is a solid black business card with white numbers written across it. The letters AC hovering above them. Cut to exterior, outside, on the road, moving early morning. A woman, Iris, 50, skinny as a rail, smart as a whip, and mean as a rattlesnake, sits behind the wheel of her truck. Her dog, Samson, a friendly German shepherd, sits in the front seat beside her. Iris is a bartender at the Horse and Cable restaurant who would serve David before he was kicked out. She is driving down a long, straight stretch of road in the wee hours of the morning. While chewing on a particularly rough slice of beef jerky, in between sips of black coffee, she notices her dog. Samson is staring at her, desperate for a slice of beef jerky.
Why don't you cast those doe eyes somewhere else before you get in trouble?
Samson continues to stare.
You trying to tell me something?
Iris hands Samson a piece of jerky. He graciously swallows it down in almost a single bite. She smiles, lifting the coffee lid off.
You want something to wash it down?
She leans the cup towards him, and Samson begins lapping it with his tongue. Iris smiles, shaking her head, when suddenly she sees something out the window. A figure is seen through the window, walking on the side of the road up ahead. Iris squints, puzzled at what she's seeing.
Now who the hell is gonna be out this early?
The truck slows as she starts to pass the stranger. Instead of pulling up beside him and rolling her passenger window down, as the man turns, she recognizes him. It's David. She lets out a wheezy laugh as Samson sticks his head out the passenger window.
I was wondering what kind of stupid son of a bitch would be walking down the road at this hour. You lose that hunk of shit to the impound lot again?
David stops walking, instead of turning to face Iris with a smile and patting Samson on the head.
Come on, Iris. I paid more to lose that truck than I did to buy it.
Iris shakes her head and pulls out a cigarette. While patting the dog, David touches its neck and notices the shiny bronze name tag on the brand new leather collar.
Hey, look at this. When'd you get the new digs, huh?
Iris finishes lighting her smoke and speaks through a cloud of haze.
Yeah, he's been a good boy. Figured he needed something that wouldn't fall off. That old one was getting pretty ratty.
She flicks the ash of the cigarette and looks him up and down.
So, you gonna tell me the story? 'Cause something tells me you had a particularly shitty night.
You ain't wrong, but when every night's a shitty night, they tend to blend together.
Yeah, I heard about what happened when I got off my shift. Tucker can be a real asshole. If it's any consolation, you lasted longer than I expected. I thought he'd kick your ass out months ago.
Oh, thanks. It was inevitable anyway. Guy's got no sense of humor.
Come again?
Well, like yesterday, for example, I'm sitting on my stool when this blind guy walks into the bar. And then a table, and then a door, and then...
Catching on, Iris interrupts him mid-joke, shaking her head, while a slight smirk crosses her face.
You're lucky my dog likes you.
It's a mutual thing between us.
Get in the damn truck already. I ain't trying to heat the whole world.
David smiles, patting Samson again as he opens the door and hops in. Cut to exterior, outside, driveway, David Camp's house. Continued. Iris pulls into the driveway and David opens the door, jumping out. Samson quickly retakes his spot in the front seat as David turns around to thank them.
Hey, thanks for the ride. Would have taken all night if I had to walk.
Pretty sure you mean morning at this point, kid.
David looks up at the streaks of light coming over the horizon.
Shit, guess so.
He turns back to her as she feeds Samson another piece of jerky.
Hey, I hate to push my luck, but is there any chance I could get a ride into town later? Like around 2 o'clock?
She stops mid-motion of handing Samson another piece and turns to look at him with an eyebrow cocked. He quickly starts talking again.
It's just, I can't pick up my truck until Monday, and I've got community service today. If I don't go then...
Give me a ring when you get up and I'll see where I'm at. All right?
Whew, thank you.
Yeah. Don't forget, I'm cheaper than a taxi, but I ain't free. You're either buying gas or lunch. Got it?
I guess I can spare.
She leans over to shut the door as she replies.
Now, go get some sleep. You look like shit.
With that, she shuts the door and pulls out of the driveway. David watches her go before he turns and walks to the house. Taking his keys out, he unlocks his door and moves and heads inside, but then stops, looking beside the door where the mail slot is attached. He notices it's overflowing. He grabs a stack and brings it inside, and before he shuts the door, cut to David Camp's house, interior kitchen. Stepping inside the house and shutting the door behind him, David puts his keys on the table and starts shuffling through the stack of letters. We see bills after bills, most of them stuck with overdue stickers. Before he can even halfway through looking through them, he tosses them in the trash. He starts to walk away and stops. Reaching into his pocket, he removes a black card. He stares at it for several seconds before walking to the fridge and sticking it underneath the magnet. On the card, hanging from the fridge as David moves off. Cut to exterior, black void, night. Dream sequence begins. David suddenly finds himself standing outside, completely surrounded by fog as he takes a few cautionary steps. He realizes that the ground is slick like ice. Confused, he looks up towards the fog again, and he begins to hear whispers coming from inside of it.
Big balloon.
He moves towards them, when suddenly, as he takes another step, David hears his footsteps in a puddle. He looks down to find there's a layer of liquid beneath his feet. His eyes begin to trace the liquid back to its source, a large hole in the ice several feet away. The fog clears around it, and he takes a hesitant step forward. The whispers stop abruptly. David stares at the foreboding darkness inside the hole and begins to hyperventilating from the sheer terror he senses in there. On the hole, the whispers get loud.
Tofi Arga Abornaz
Close up on David's face as the whispers shift into sounds of crackling flames within the thin echo of the shrill human screams behind it. The dream sequence ends. Hard cut. Interior David's room. Mid-afternoon. David opens his eyes, gasping for air. As he sits up, he reaches to grab his left arm in distress and curses to himself, hissing the words through his teeth. He takes long, sharp breaths. Beside him, there are several bottles of pills, all sitting on his bed, and they with different prescription names. Bottles of Xanax, Trazodone, and I don't know the other pill name, but powerful sleep aids. They lay scattered, some empty, all over the desk. He hisses in pain as he looks down at his left arm. Flames. There's a red birthmark on his arm. That looked like a hole with cracks that form around it. Back to scene. Suddenly, he hears knocking coming from the front of the house. Hissing through his teeth from pain, David stands up and makes his way towards the front door. 3 consecutive knocks from the front door. David looks up, clearly getting annoyed as he heads towards the door.
Jesus Christ, I heard you.
Finally, he makes it to the front door, beating the next step of knocks from sounding as he quickly opens it. The midday sun nearly blinds him as he throws his hands up like a visor to shield himself from it.
Yeah?
Hey, dipshit, didn't you say you had community service at 2 o'clock today?
It takes a second for his eyes to adjust, but as soon as he recognizes Iris, his eyes go wide as he looks towards a clock in the living room. Clock reads 1:37.
Oh, fuck, I'm so fucked.
Nah, quit whining. You still got time. Throw your shirt on and get out of here.
Alright, I'm coming, thank you.
Yeah, just hurry the hell up.
Exterior, church, outside. An old man stands outside the front doors of the stone church. He's wearing khaki pants and a blue-collared sweater. His hands are tucked into the pockets of his thin black suit jacket, hidden against the cold. We don't recognize the man in civilian clothes at first until he turns. We then see it as Sheriff Donovan standing on the steps, watching as a truck comes speeding down the road, only to finally stop at the curb, letting David out. Donovan stands by the door, holding the keys to the building and waiting in the freezing cold to let the perpetually late David inside. Quickly leaping out of the passenger seat, he shuts the door behind him and bounds up the stairs towards the sheriff.
Hey, I'm sorry,
I told you to be here 30 minutes early to set up. You've got about 5 minutes before people start walking through the door, so I'd get in there and haul ass.
Shit, alright, I'm on it.
He makes the move towards the door when Donovan stops him again, putting a hand on his chest.
This is the simplest thing I could get you for community service, and I try to be fair.
Sheriff Donovan shakes his head slowly, clearly upset about what he needs to say.
You fucked this up again. I'm sorry, David. I can't help you this time.
David's expression suddenly changes. He becomes more serious and slowly nods.
I understand. I won't fuck this up.
Okay.
David steps past him and into the building. Donovan watches him go, a dour, clearly unconvinced expression on his face, as we move into the interior of the church. There's a clock on the wall that clearly shows it's 2 o'clock. David moves quickly to the front of a table, playing host to a pot of black coffee and rushing to a plate of donuts and accessories. He stacks some styrofoam cups beside everything and looks off to his left. Right as people begin piling into the room. The small crowd of gathered souls looks broken and sad as they make their way inside. They mingle as they take their coats off before slowly making their way into the circle of dented, rust-stained old chairs. Cream white walls and dusty furniture only add to the depressing decor of the space. As a man, Tom, 40s with a dour, low-hung expression, walks over to the coffee station and proceeds to prepare a cup for himself. Putting the final touches on the spread, David places the creamer down and turns to face the man.
How's it going, Tom?
Not dead yet.
Well said.
Tom grabs a cup of coffee beside David, and then both of them, coffee in hand, turn around to walk back to the group. David takes a look around the circle of withered faces, unsure where to start.
How's everyone doing this morning?
A general murmur of greeting comes from the group as David nods. He then puts his coffee down and takes a deep breath.
Y'all sound about as excited as I feel.
David takes another look at the group and happens to lock eyes with Tom.
Tom, would you like to start us off?
Tom starts
Sure.
nodding, catching David's attention.
Sure, I'll give it a shot.
Appreciate it.
My name is Tom, and I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Tom.
Hi, Tom.
Been coming a while, though I guess most of you know that. I never used to have a problem with drinking, but after my wife Debbie died, things changed.
David is listening intently when he is suddenly distracted by something out a window near the group. Tom's voice starts to fade out. David is transfixed by what he sees. When outside the church, far in the distance, what looks like a man is staring straight, looking directly at him through the church window. Though the shape of its body is masculine, as it gets closer, it becomes obvious that the thing has no face, just featureless, flesh-colored skin stretched over its skull.
There just started to be like this, emptiness, like a hole that you can't fill. But I tried for a long time.
The thing in the distance moves closer, its clothing changing. It now appears singed and burnt. Any visible flesh is charred beyond recognition.
I realized I was on the edge of a cliff, and I could either take that last step or...
Now less than 10 yards from the window, it continues to head straight towards David, when suddenly a burst of flames ignites the thing. The creature continues forward while on fire. We close on David's horrified expression as Tom's voice is barely heard in the background. The creature begins charging towards the window of the church and makes like it's going to crash through the glass when suddenly...
Ah!
David falls over as he leaps backward, stumbling over his seat and landing on the floor. He continues screaming for several moments, crawling backwards while covering his eyes and grabbing at his forearm as if it were on fire. Several moments of awkward silence linger in the air, when finally David opens his eyes. As he begins to steady his breathing, he sees everyone in the room standing up, staring at him, saying nothing. His right arm still gripping his left, David slowly releases it, only to see his hand is covered in blood. He stares at it, noticing that the birthmark is entirely covered in blood. We then move to David's home in the driveway as the sun sets. Iris pulls into the driveway and parks, still staring straight ahead. She only slightly turns as she asks the question to David.
You want to talk about it?
Not really, no.
Yeah, I figured.
Finally, she turns all the way, looking at him now.
Can you at least tell me what happened?
Maybe if I knew. The truth is, I've got no fucking idea.
David jumps out of her truck when she calls to him immediately.
David, wait!
He turns around, ready to speak with her before shutting the door.
Are you gonna be okay?
Yeah, I'll be fine. It's been a long day.
Alright, you got stuff to eat in there?
Beer. Don't worry, carbs will fill me up.
A tired smile crosses his face.
Jesus.
A genuine smile crosses her face as she shakes her head at him.
I'll swing by after my shift. I can probably steal some leftovers from the kitchen.
You don't need to do that.
Yeah, shut up and close the door already.
Thank you, Iris.
Uh-huh.
As he starts to walk away, she pipes up again.
David,
He turns back, the exhaustion truly starting to show now.
you can talk to me if you need to.
I know.
She nods back, and with that, she backs up and pulls out of the driveway. He watches her go before making his way towards the house. His mind clearly somewhere else as he reaches the front door. He's quickly brought back to reality when he spots something stapled to the house. David stares at the thing on the wall in complete bewilderment for several moments before finally reaching up and ripping the thing off in one quick motion. We then move to the inside of his home, in the living room, sometime later in the night. David is sitting on his couch, an open beer in his right hand. The television is on, playing just loud enough to hear as he sips his drink. A commercial is playing, starring a self-help guru. The lower third on the TV displays the name Aaron Caldwell, talking about his book, The Other Side. On the screen, the man talks about how most families have relationships that are built on lies. Well, David suddenly starts paying attention as he hears what the man talks about.
My book has sold in millions for one reason. It works. Every family has trauma, have reasons to lie to one another. But the other side will show you that we all have a voice in our head, one that guides us towards whatever choices we make. And once we truly understand that, we can begin to learn what we sound like from the other side.
Sitting on his couch, David looks slightly choked up as he takes another sip from his drink. He still watches in silence, listening as the man speaks.
If you want to change your perspective, if you want to understand why you're afraid or can't get along with your loved ones, reach out. Buy the book. If you have questions, start the journey toward finally finding your answers today.
Applause erupts from the audience. David continues to stare at the TV, obviously affected. He starts to squeeze his fist and stops. Instead, he looks away, moving his left hand slightly and uncrumpling the thing he's been holding this entire time. He holds it out to look at it, and we now see the words eviction notice written across the paper in red ink. David stares at it for several moments before finally crumpling it up and staring at the ceiling.
Shit.
On the television, where the show continues to play out as we move closer and closer, moving to within 12 inches of the glass while the parallel lines begin growing larger and larger. We then cut to the interior of David's kitchen sometime later as the door swings open. Light cascades into the darkness, illuminating the interior as David stands in front of his refrigerator looking inside. After a few moments, he reaches in and removes a cold beer. He shuts the fridge and turns around to open his drink. He rips off the aluminum tab and turns to toss it in the trash when something catches his eye. He turns, staring at the black card hanging from the fridge. He unclips it and reads the numbers again. He flips the black card around in his hands, checking the back, and he finds nothing else on it. He looks at the front again and shakes his head, mumbling to himself.
The hell?
He pulls out his phone and begins inputting the numbers. It is nearly pitch black in the frozen woods outside of David's home. The lights from the house act as a beacon to wayward souls. As the air is still, but even the animals know that something bad lingers here, something watching David from afar. He wanders past the windows as we see him on the phone, completely oblivious to anything lurking beyond. Inside, David walks past all of the windows in his living room several times, unconsciously pacing. As he holds his phone to one ear, he grips the black card in his other hand. He continues his march back and forth as the phone continues to ring. Finally, someone answers the call. The deep, growly voice of a man.
Who is this?
Hey, I'm not sure how to say this, but received a card with this number written on it last night. I was told to call as soon as possible.
There's silence on the line, David becoming visibly uncomfortable.
Hello?
My employer has a proposition for you.
Okay.
Something's been found beneath the frozen lake at his estate. We have a crew working to dig it out.
Shit, what'd you find down there?
Silence on the line.
Hello?
You're a contractor, right?
I mean, I've been a lot of things, but yeah, that's one of them.
We need a structure built at the site. My employer specifically requested for you to build it.
Alright. What's the job pay?
Name your price. Room and board will be covered under any expenses as well.
Wait, what if...
Come to 52 Woodward Avenue. Be there by sunrise or we leave without you. If you come alone.
Suddenly, David hears the line go click. He holds the phone out to look at it in astonishment. He's only staring at it for a fraction of a second when suddenly the noise startles him and he quickly looks in the direction of his front door, realizing someone's knocking. David stares at the door for a moment, unsure what to do, when he glances at a clock hanging on the wall that reads 12:43 a.m. He looks back to the door, second-guessing himself. It's late. Why would someone be here at this time? He continues to stare, beginning to convince himself the knocking wasn't real, when suddenly it comes again, louder this time. The door, everything about it begins to look ominous. The shadows around it seem darker, more intense. David hesitates again before he takes his first step towards it. The first is followed by the second, and then quickly the third. Within moments, he's in front of it, slowly reaching out towards the knob. He clutches the handle, eventually shutting his eyes, and with a quick intake of breath, he pulls the door open in a fluid motion. when suddenly we see, standing on the porch, Iris, Samson by her side, holding a white box of leftovers. David's adrenaline pumping. As the door swings open, he reacts as if he were expecting something horrible. As Iris stares, eyebrows raised in complete confusion, he stumbles back, releasing the breath he'd been holding.
Jesus, what's got you so fucking spooked?
Nothing. I just. Hey, what the hell are you doing here?
Iris' eyebrows still raised, lifts up the box.
Food? Did you forget already?
No, I just. Sorry. Come in, please.
Nah, that's alright. It's been a long night already. Gotta get some sleep while I'm still can. Early shift tomorrow. From the looks of things, seem like you should probably get some sleep too.
Hey, wait, before you go.
Iris makes to leave, but then turns back as David calls to her. Clearly tired, she raises an eye at him again. He smiles sheepishly as he readies himself to ask for one final favor, and she frowns. We then move to the exterior of a back road, inside Iris' truck, early the next morning. David, with Iris and Samson, follow the back road through the woods. As Samson sits in the back as usual, Iris drives and David sits nervously up front. He has a bag packed and looks as if he's not sure he wants to be there. Iris keeps an eye on him, watching him as they drive.
You sure you want to do this?
I don't got much of a choice.
You always have a choice.
Not if I want to keep living with a roof over my head.
There's always another way, David.
David looks off to the right at a sign coming up. The sign reads Woodward Avenue.
Turn here.
Iris slows and takes the turn onto a dirt road. Right as it starts to snow, small and delicate flakes fall around the truck.
Jesus, you sure this is the right way?
I mean, it's what they said on the phone.
I don't know. It seems pretty barren out here to me.
David doesn't respond as they continue to drive, passing several old structures as they go. With each building they pass continuing to grow further and further apart, David stares at them through his window as their weather-worn numbers continue to ascend. He keeps his eyes peeled for the one he's looking for, when suddenly he squints hard at the one they're approaching.
Must be it. 52.
He points to an old aluminum sign rusting on a tree. As Iris pulls into the spot, which is nothing but an old snow-covered lot with a half-broken fence around it, David looks at the clock on the truck's dashboard as it reads 5:57 p.m. a.m.
Should be here any second.
Tell me now, are you sure you want to go through with this?
David watches them move closer and closer. He looks as if he's about to say something when the vehicle approaching suddenly stops. Its door opens, and the vehicle is a rusted old pickup truck. Sits idling while its driver stands next to it. He stares at Iris' truck, waiting for David to make his next move. Finally, David turns to Iris.
I think it's too late for second thoughts now.
He opens the door and hops out, pulling his bag along with him. He then shuts the door and turns back to her, a thin smile on his face.
Make sure to tell someone if you don't hear from me in a few days.
I don't think it would do you much good at that point.
And at least they'll have something to bury.
He looks over at the idling truck, then back to Iris and taps her truck reassuringly.
See you soon. Thanks.
With that, he shuts the door and Iris watches him go, talking to the man and tossing his bag in the back of the truck.
Good luck.
Finally, she throws the truck into reverse and begins to pull out. We then see Iris pulling down the road as the truck moves back the way it came. The snow has picked up, flurrying like crazy now and making it hard to see. Iris drives slowly, cautiously, as she makes her way back down the road. She uses her hand to try and wipe away some condensation from the windshield as she curses.
God damn it! Shit!
As she curses, she suddenly slams on her brakes, causing the truck to fishtail. She sees a large branch down in the middle of the road. She expertly rides the fishtail to a stop just in front of the blockage. She sits in the driver's seat, staring out the windshield as small flakes of fresh snowfall softly land atop the glass. She stares forward directly at the branch, her mouth agape and clearly annoyed.
You've got to be kidding me.
Realizing she has no choice, she has to move it. Iris shakes her head in annoyance and slaps the steering wheel.
Son of a bitch!
Samson nervously nuzzles at her while she works to get her gloves on.
It's alright, you big baby. I'll be right back.
With that, she pulls up her hood and gets out of the truck, leaving it to idle. Samson watches her go, quickly jumping into the front seat to do so. Iris works to move the blockage while Samson stares, clearly nervous as he watches her progress. Suddenly, it looks as if she's heard something. He turns, and in an instant there is a change in his demeanor. Samson begins a low rumble of a growl. His hackles rise, and his eyes quickly darken as the shadow of something unknown moves past the glass on the driver's side window. She's made it to the obstruction now, and Iris was bent over trying to figure out the best way to tackle the problem. Iris is working at the problem while something moves in the darkness behind her. Samson is losing his mind now, barking with a ferocious intensity. The noise catches her attention, but before she can even turn, the barking is cut off by several intense yips of pain, immediately followed by silence. In shock, she hesitates, not moving from her spot in the road, when after a moment, it feels like an eternity, she calls out,
Samson!
Her call is met with nothing but the whisper of a mild winter breeze. She exhales several warm breaths that instantly turn to fog as they meet the frozen temperature. Then she waits after several moments of deafening silence, when she finally takes a step forward, the momentary paralysis disappearing as she starts to move, and Iris rushes back to her truck. We move to the inside of the truck, where from inside the cab we see Iris through the driver's side window. As she steps into frame, the glass is covered in frost, causing poor visibility. As she attempts to peer inside, abandoning the idea, she opens the door instead, while still calling to Samson.
Samson!
Her voice cuts off mid-sentence as she gets a better look at the interior of the truck, where the passenger seat is now clearly laid with blood all over it.
What the fuck?
Seeing the bizarre scene, she quickly exits the truck. We move to the truck's outside. Not even bothering to shut her door, Iris rushes around to the front. Approaching the passenger side door, she spots something on the snow beneath it. There's a blood trail leading towards the back of the truck. Terrified, she takes small steps following the trail towards the tailgate. Rounding the corner, she instantly breaks down, one hand flying to cover her mouth as tears almost immediately begin trailing down her cheeks. We see the eviscerated remains of Samson on the ground. Nothing plays, just the eerie sound of freezing wind as Iris approaches the body and falls to her knees, one quivering hand reaching out toward him, when suddenly Iris's pained expression changes as a black plastic bag is wrapped around her face from behind. We then cut to black. Moments later, we see a frozen lake at night, and in total darkness we hear David's heavy breathing. As he comes to, he finds himself laying on ice. As he stands up, he realizes he's on a frozen lake. He looks around, finding everything to be surreal and dreamlike. He wanders in the strange landscape until, from behind him, he hears a voice.
See ya, non.
Turning towards the sound, he finds fog rolling in on the ice, coming towards him fast. As the fog surrounds him, he hears the sound of fire crackling again, followed by the sound of a male voice.
David! End of dream sequence. Hard cut. Interior truck. Moving day. David opens his eyes, awakens with a gas, and finds himself in the backseat of a truck, having fallen asleep on the ride back with him. Still in a daze, he sits up, looking around. The inside is dingy. The seats are made of weathered fabric with plenty of holes. Several tools line the floor, giving the impression that it's clearly a beater truck. David turns to look at the driver, an older, dark-skinned man, Morris, mid-50s, with an unkempt white beard and a skier hat. The man ignores him, entirely focused on the road until David finally decides to pipe up.
Hey, how long have we been driving? I feel like I've been asleep for hours.
David turns as he speaks, looking out at the window. He sees the desolate landscape around him. Nothing but gray clouds and snow-covered woodlands in every direction. There are now several inches of snow on the ground, and it's obvious that a vehicle without four-wheel drive wouldn't have made it this far, this way. He looks back to the driver. He still hasn't answered.
You hear me? How far do we have to go?
The driver still ignores him, so David pulls out his phone. The screen on his phone shows no signal. Morris.
Don't bother.
David looks from his phone back to the driver, puzzled.
What do you mean? Where the hell are we?
Mid-speech, David spots something through his window as they round a corner. A strange-looking building in the distance. An obsidian building.
What is that?
Morris is quiet as David continues to stare out his window. But after a few moments, he speaks.
We're here.
With that, the truck jerks to a stop, knocking David out of his reverie. Morris turns to David.
This is where you get out.
Okay.
Cut to exterior, Caldwell House, outside day. David quickly departs, opening the door to exit the vehicle. As soon as he shuts the door behind him, the truck begins to move again, taking off down the road. He takes a few steps after it, confused.
Hey!
He doesn't get far, however, before a quiet female voice speaks up from behind him.
I wouldn't worry, he's only parking.
David quickly turns back around, facing the woman who spoke to him, who has raven black hair and a thin frame. She is dressed very modestly, like a secretary or a talent agent. She has large, expressive eyes and looks to be only slightly younger than himself.
Oh, my shit's in there.
It'll all be brought to your room later, I promise.
He looks exhausted at this point, throwing up his hands.
Jesus, you could have said something.
You must be David, right?
Right.
Kira, it's a pleasure to meet you.
You too.
As he begins to calm down, David looks around, really taking in the location for the first time.
Thank you.
One large farmhouse with an enormous barn is several hundred yards away, and a separate building much further away than that, the one that he saw on his way in. Other than the buildings, there's nothing but woods in every direction, as far as the eye can see.
Please, follow me.
She gestures with her hands, and she proceeds to lead him towards the main house.
Jesus, this place is huge. I don't see a single house on the ride in. How big is this property?
I couldn't say precisely, but several thousand acres at the very least.
Holy shit, who owns it?
It's been in the Caldwell's care for as long as anyone can remember and remains a cherished family plot. The current heir, Aaron Caldwell, has chosen to retain it as well. He decided to resettle here several years ago.
Aaron Caldwell? You mean the self-help guy from the commercials?
He prefers the term author.
Yeah, whatever you want to call him, what the hell is someone like him doing the way of hell out here?
I suppose that's something you'll have to ask him yourself.
She turns back, smiling at him. As they finally reach the main door, she holds it open and ushers him inside. Cut to interior Caldwell house. Hallway continuous. David and Kira enter the house and make their way down the long hallways. He looks around at the odd and very old-looking decoration lining the walls. They soon pass an occupied room, just as the inhabitants, Jed is leaving. Crossing paths in the hall, David sees he is wearing boots and Morton gear. They nod to each other. As the man passes, he raises his hand to put his hat on. The man has bloody knuckles. Jed notices David watching him and quickly puts his hand in his pocket, and he turns away. David briefly watches the man walk away. Eventually, Kira stops and looks back at him.
This way.
Oh, sorry.
It is easier for the people Mr. Caldwell has employed to stay here while they work. The less people who know he's here, the better.
I can imagine.
Before I introduce you, there are a couple of rules I'd like to go over.
Rules?
Yes, just small things. Mr. Caldwell is a very solitary man. He usually keeps his social interactions to a minimum. He is therefore not used to this level of activity around his home, so I try to ensure a certain amount of courtesy in his interactions with strangers.
Jesus Christ.
Rule number 1, never refer to him as a self-help guru. Mr. Caldwell takes particular offense to the term as he sees the genre as manipulative and childish.
Right.
Rule number 2, don't attempt any discussions about religion.
Are you serious?
Very. Mr. Caldwell finds the notion of religion distasteful. I would refrain from any mention of the subject.
It's a little ironic.
How so?
I mean, I just think a single man spreading his message to the masses while spouting a hatred for religion, be just a tiny bit hypocritical.
Eventually, they reach a door leading to the parlor, and she stops, her hand on the door handle.
I believe once you've had a conversation with him, you may find yourself believing differently.
She opens the door.
After you.
David steps beside her, walking past as he enters the room while nodding his head. Sorry. Cut to interior Caldwell house, parlor, continuous. As he enters the room, he immediately sees a large fireplace with roaring flames. A man stands in front of it, staring into the smoke. Stepping into the room, he quickly sees that the walls are ordained with strange paintings of esoteric symbols. Other oddities line the shelves beneath them, the strangest of which being a series of masks set atop of wooden hangers on the mantel above the fireplace. They stare out into the room so that their features are on display. Each of them is unique, though none of them appear to represent any creature known to man. The door behind him suddenly shuts as Kira enters, startling David. The noise causes the man by the fireplace to turn around, giving David his first good look at his host. Aaron, Caucasian, late 50s, well-dressed with gray beard and a cup of tea gripping in both hands. His grooming is immaculate, and the subtle grace of his movements paint the picture of an extremely charismatic individual. Aaron steps forward, one hand outreached in greeting.
Ah, our new arrival. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Caldwell.
Aaron, please.
Ah, sure.
So you're to be doing some work for me, I believe.
Aaron walks over to the table by the window and puts his cup down, apparently finished. He begins looking through an ancient-looking book. David slowly walks towards him, while also admiring the strange furnishings in the room, such as the painting of an ancient-looking building with a familiar symbol engraved upon it, the obsidian symbol.
Yeah, though the person I spoke to on the phone is a little vague on specifics.
Still looking through his book.
I believe it was Morris you spoke with, the groundskeeper here and a dear friend of mine. He's managing most of this for me, and if I'm not mistaken, you'll be working side by side with him throughout.
That's correct. Morris has a significant role in this project.
I've got no issue with that, but I do think it's important I know what this is all about exactly before I jump in head first.
Aaron looks up, still facing away from David. He stares out the window. Suddenly, he slams the book in his hand and shuts it with a loud thump and turns around to face him.
You'll have to forgive me, but I disagree.
Aaron takes several calculated steps towards David as he speaks his next words.
You've come here to do a job, one you shall be more than sufficiently compensated for. I am of the opinion that the project's purpose has little bearing on its construction.
Aaron is still smiling as he steps past David to put his book back on the shelf. David cocks his head, annoyed but undeterred.
Alright, then let me ask a different question. Why me?
Aaron stops in mid-motion, slowly turning to face him.
I'm sorry, what do you mean?
You bailed me out of the jail. I've gathered that much. What I can't figure out is why. Why the hell would you go out of your way to hire a guy with no vehicle, no steady employment history? Doesn't make sense.
Aaron is quiet for several moments, looking away from David, and walking back towards the fireplace. He then moves to a spot beside the fireplace with a whiskey decanter and makes 2 drinks.
I was hoping to avoid this, but to be blunt, I'm familiar with your story, David. I felt something when I learned who you were, something like kinship, if you will.
He finishes the drink and begins sipping from one of the glasses.
You see, I've lost quite a lot as well. My parents when I was young, and my daughter Anna much more recently, which makes us very much alike in a way. So I felt a strong desire to help, if I could.
He steps closer to David and hands him the second drink. David takes it.
Right, so this is charity?
David downs the drink.
Guess there are worse ways to find a job.
Not entirely. Despite your less savory activities, I've been told you do fine work, and you need a man with the skills required to help me finish what I've started here. Despite any personal motivation on my part, you do fit the bill.
David doesn't reply, simply stares down at his glass as he thinks.
So, have I satisfied your curiosity?
David
Will you
looks
take the job?
Sorry. David looks away.
I wouldn't be here if I hadn't already decided.
Aaron smiles as if he already knew what David was about to say before he said it.
Perfect. Then Kira can take you to the dig site when you're ready. To help you familiarize with yourself with the place, then she can show you where you'll be sleeping while you stay with us.
I'd be happy to.
They both make to leave when David suddenly stops, turning back and speaking again.
Can I just ask one thing?
By all means.
What exactly did you find down there?
Aaron turns away, looking back towards the fire.
Ask me again once this is over, and maybe I'll have an answer for you.
David looks annoyed by this, clearly wishing to speak more, but Kira gently nudges him forward, urging him out the door. After they leave and the door shuts, Aaron walks towards a window in the room. From above the window, looking down, Kira and David exit the house and begin moving towards the path to the dig site. Aaron stares through the glass, watching their progress from above. Cut to exterior frozen lake day. A dead tractor sits on the ice like a lonely beached whale. The desperately cold frozen air sheds tiny flakes of snow as Kira and David approach Morris on the lake. Morris's eyes them cautiously upon their approach, but Kira is quick to break the ice.
Afternoon, Morris. I believe you've met David already. Where's the rest of the crew?
Sent Jed on an errand, but I had to let the others off. Nothing left until I finish here.
Morris gestures with a nod towards the broken machine.
Well, that's unfortunate, but regardless, I'd still appreciate it if you could bring him up to speed.
She gestures with her hand and then turns back to face David so she can address him next.
Anyway, Morris can take it from here. He'll show you what needs to be done, and I'm guessing it's probably a good idea to get started sooner rather than later.
David follows her gaze, looking at the sky, then turns towards Morris as he speaks.
Makes sense to me.
David reaches out his hands, and after a moment of hesitation, Morris shakes it.
Great, I'll leave it to you then.
With a smile, she turns and heads back across the ice. They stare at each other awkwardly for a moment. While Morris sneers, David looks past him to the dead tractor.
What happened there?
Shit the bed. Had to send the rest of the men home till it's fixed, so at least for today, you're gonna cut while I take care of it. You got a problem with that?
No, sir.
Good.
Morris turns away and heads towards the tractor, and David follows. Exterior frozen lake, sometime later. David feeds gas into the chainsaw, ignites the motor, and then begins cutting into the ice as the sun drops lower into the sky behind him. Nearby, Morris works to fix the tractor, while shades of the setting sun cascade over the lake. The two men struggle at their task as they continue working towards the end of a long, exhausting day. As David works his way deeper into the layers of ice, his saw begins to chug and catch, evidently stalling out, now stuck into the ice.
Piece of shit.
David switches the chainsaw off and reaches down to get a closer look. After a few moments, he is able to pry it free, but his attention is quickly grabbed by something else. David looks at the ice and notices how thick it is.
What the hell?
As he stares at the layer of solid ice, he moves even closer to the ground, desperate to understand what he is seeing. Could it be real? When his face is several inches away, suddenly, an inky black substance moves under the ice. David immediately stumbles back, landing on his backside, while scurrying away.
Jesus fuck!
Morris's face as he turns to pick up his tool and sees David screaming and scurrying back. David quickly rolls over and gets to his feet as Morris jogs across the ice to see what's happening.
Holy shit.
Morris appears on screen, looking from David to the hole and back.
What is it? What happened?
David points vigorously towards the spot where he had been cutting and where his chainsaw still sits.
Under the ice, there. There's a fucking.
What? Spit it out.
I'll fucking like a worm or something.
A worm?
I don't know. Maybe that's what it looked like. It was black and slid. I don't fucking know. Okay, it looked like some kind of thing.
Morris eyes him suspiciously.
What do you want me to say? That's what I saw.
If I asked you to open your pockets, would you do it?
What the fuck is that supposed to mean?
I know your type.
Oh, fuck you.
You'd have to be pretty stupid to throw an opportunity like this away. Wouldn't be the first time I've seen it happen, though.
Listen, I ain't had a drop since I got here. You want me to piss in your hand and you can test it?
Morris looks up at him and down. His expression is unreadable.
I saw what I saw, and I don't need every shithead I work with to believe me.
They stay locked in a staring match for a few seconds until finally Morris looks away towards the hole and nods.
Finish the job.
He turns away, making his way back towards the tractor. When he stops, looking over his shoulder.
But try not to dig up any more ice worms while you're at it.
With that, he scoffs, shaking his head as he makes his way back. David watches him go for a few moments, before eventually turning back to the hole. He picks up the chainsaw and starts it up again. But instead, he holds off for a few moments. Instead, he simply stares at the spot he's been cutting, the spot where he'd seen the thing. Cut to exterior, outside woods, sunset. The clouds move quickly across the sky as the rest of the daylight begins to fade. Fog begins to appear in the dark recesses of the forest, slowly rolling out, following the onset of night. Cut to exterior Codwell house, outside sunset. The sun has almost completely disappeared over the horizon as David and Morris return from the work site. They trudge through the newly formed mounds of snow when David spots something odd. He sees Mr. Codwell leaving the main house and moving towards the strange building he'd seen on the way in, the Obsidian building. Mr. Codwell reaches the building and steps inside before shutting the door behind him. David looks on, mildly curious. He continues to stare for a moment, but never stops moving towards the main house. Cut to interior Caldwell house, David's room, night. David sits on his bed, going through his belongings. He pulls out his phone and stares at it for a moment before attempting to make a call. David selects Iris's contact info and attempts to call her. David hones the phone to his ear for several seconds, waiting for the dial tone. Eventually, he hears the beeping sound, implying that the call had failed. He holds the phone out in anger, staring at it when a voice pipes up from behind him.
I promise you that is a lost cause here.
David immediately turns towards the sound, only to see Kira standing in the doorway. She is holding a tray of food.
How long you been standing there?
Sorry.
No, go ahead. Stepping into the room, she moves towards the desk.
Long enough to know that's not gonna work.
She puts the plate of food down on the desk.
Who do you need to call anyway?
Just a friend. She gave me a ride here. It's not like her not to call.
Well, I wouldn't worry. Even if she tried, you would have had no way of knowing.
Yeah, it's just, I got this feeling.
What do you mean?
It's hard to explain.
Try me.
I just got this sinking feeling in my gut, and I know it's weird, but after today, I just...
Today? Why? What happened today?
David suddenly looks like he let something slip. He almost wants to tell her, but decides against it.
It's nothing. It's just... I just meant, something about that lake feels wrong. You know what I mean?
Do you know how I met Mr. Caldwell? It was several years ago, but oddly enough, it had a lot of similarities to the way you met him.
She casually plays with a trinket on the desk.
Despite his protests, I have always known him to be a philanthropist at heart. It is my firm belief that any project Aaron puts his mind to will inevitably be for the good of humanity. I know that might be hard to believe.
David doesn't answer at first. He simply stares out the window, thinking. But as she stops playing with the trinket and makes for the door, he turns.
What'd you mean? What were you doing when he found you?
She turns to him.
Nothing good. My sister, Sarah, had just died. She was hit by a drunk driver. We were very close. We'd been adopted together, so it was hard moving forward after that.
Yeah, I can imagine that'd be hard. I'm sorry.
Don't be. We wouldn't be who we are without the scars we pick up along the way. Besides, occasionally something terrible can grow into the motivation for something good.
David stares at her, his eyes welling up for a moment. He understands, but it's too much. He looks away, changing the subject quickly.
What did he do to get you to leave with him, I mean? What could he have possibly said to you?
Mystery for another time, I think. But I promise nothing bad's gonna happen out here. The only thing in that lake is a bunch of frozen water.
She motions towards the plate of food.
Eat up. You did good today. Keep it up and you might even snag a permanent job here.
With that, she smiles as she closes the door and leaves him to his own thoughts. After she's gone, he moves towards the food, picking it over, when he is distracted by something out the window. Mr. Caldwell is leaving the obsidian building and making his way back towards the house. David looks on with growing suspicion showing on his face. Cut to exterior outside sometime later. A curtain of darkness covers the land as a bone-white moon sits above the stars. Misty, partially translucent clouds slowly trace a line across the sky, occasionally covering the pocketed face of the pale moon above. Cut to black, exterior, frozen lake, night.
In the darkness, we hear the whispers.
Yugon El Nagal.
And David suddenly opens his eyes to find himself again standing on the frozen lake. Fog surrounds him. Nearly everything is covered in it and impossible to see except for the hole. Now only feet away, its infinite darkness calls to him without a voice, compelling him forward. David shuts his eyes, his body quivering as if something invisible were touching him. His eyes closed, he reaches out his hand, taking several steps forward. At the lip, as if compelled, he gets to his knees, his right hand still held out. The whispers call to him again.
Yugon El Nagal.
He reaches forward towards the darkness of the hole. He has nearly made contact when suddenly an arm shoots out. David stumbles back as the arm, covered in black blood and gore, grips the snow. Pulling itself out, briefly a face emerges from the hole, barely recognizable. It's covered in the same black blood and bits of stringy gore, but David can still recognize it as the face of Iris. Her eyes plead with him as she desperately tries to grab something and pull herself out, calling to him.
Oh, I'm so sorry. David!
But before he can do anything to help her, in an instant, she is sucked back down into the darkness inside the hole. And we immediately cut back to the inside of the Caldwell house in David's room as he awakens with a jolt. Now sweaty and soaked, he sits up, rubbing his face.
Jesus Christ.
He stands up, getting out of bed, and stumbles to the window to try to catch his breath. After a moment, he grabs a shirt and begins putting it on as he looks out. Below, he sees Morris, already prepped and beginning to move through the yard. When he turns, he sees David stops in mid-step, hearing his name, and turns around. He is just in time to see Aaron appear, now standing in the open archway of the room, clearly holding something under his arm.
Good morning. I was hoping to catch you before you left.
Aaron removes the small document placed under his left arm and holds it out, intending for David to take it.
These are the design documents for the structure. You'll be the first to see them, actually. I've heard everything is nearly in place, so I thought it would be best for you to take them now.
Aaron takes them, slowly unrolling them. David takes them and slowly unrolls them to see what they hold, while we see partial images from inside the document. He stares hard at the images while trying to make sense of what he's seen.
Whoa, what's this supposed to be?
Let me worry about that. You just worry about getting it done.
Yeah, alright.
David turns to walk away when Aaron suddenly speaks up again.
David, wait. Maybe before you go, I was wondering if I might have a quick word.
David looks back towards his destination, the front door, then back to Aaron again, clearly anxious to meet up with Morris. His hesitance is obvious, but Aaron simply smiles and awaits his reply, refusing him any easy outs.
Sure, what's up?
Aaron turns, moving back into the room again, while beckoning for David to follow with a motion of his head. With some slight reservation, he complies, following him into the room.
It's all right. Morris can handle things for the moment. Besides, you both work for me if I'm not mistaken.
I can't argue with that.
Aaron places the cups down and begins filling each to the brim with black coffee.
Perfect. So, now that I've got you here, I'd like to ask you a question.
He offers the full mug to David, who takes it.
Alright, shoot.
When was the last time you slept through the night?
David suddenly gets stiff, rigid, and can't make eye contact.
What are you talking about?
It's okay, David. I know what it's like.
David puts the cup down, turning away to look out the kitchen window.
I suffer in the same way, with the same guilt, and I want to help you.
Aaron gently reaches for David's hand.
The question is, will you let me?
The moment Aaron's hand touches David, we see a flashback of an infinite black hole that calls to him as sounds of flames rage all around him. David stands up immediately, accidentally knocking over his coffee.
Shit.
It's okay. Don't worry about it. It's a cheap rug.
David steps past the stain, slowly inching backward and away.
It's not important, but
David interrupts him, barely letting him get a word out as he responds.
Oh, I'm sorry. That stuff's not really my cup of tea. Maybe some other time.
He quickly tries to move past him and towards the exit.
David,
He doesn't want to, but he looks back.
will you do me one small kindness?
Desperate to leave, David stares at him.
Will you sleep on it?
Sure.
With a simple nod, David disappears around the corner, leaving the house. We then move to the frozen lake, later in the day. Across the lake, Morris cuts into the ice with a chainsaw as David piles lumber nearby. Each of them works without speaking, long into the hours of the day as time passes. David stops briefly to wipe sweat from his brow when he notices something way up over the trees to the east. We see a smoke trail coming from the sky in the woods nearby. After a few moments of staring, the chainsaw grinds to a stop and Morris moves to his side. David turns as he sees him walk up.
You see that?
Morris squints as he looks towards the smoke signals.
Looks like a brush fire.
From who? I thought you said there's no one within 40 miles of this place.
I did. It's Mr. Caldwell. He's the outdoorsman type.
Huh. Kieran never mentioned that.
Morris goes back to work as David stares at the smoke for a moment longer. And we then move to the same scene, but sometime much later in the day, as David and Morris continue their individual labors. While the sun sinks lower in the sky, David strips and sands, working the wood down to fine details as Morris feeds gas into his chainsaw. Finally, David works at a board with an electric sander as he lowers it down and towards the camera. We move to some time later when the specifications are nearly done and the structure is almost built. David wipes sweat from his brow as he steps back to look at his creation. His expression is one of confusion as he stares at his work, having no idea what the thing's purpose even is. Behind him, he hears the sound of Morris's chainsaw whirring to a stop. He turns instinctively and notices Morris staring at his handiwork, and after a moment he puts the tool down and makes his way towards him. Morris steps beside him while still staring at the structure, and after a beat,
That sure is a hell of a thing.
Yeah.
Morris turns, puzzled expression obvious on his face.
You built it. Don't you have any pride in your work?
David stares long and hard at his creation, and we finally see what it looks like. The structure is shaped like a large wooden sundial, patterned after the obsidian symbol he's seen all around, and has the same dimensions to match a 6-foot circle.
I mean, usually, yeah.
The structure is made of a solid, dark wood like mahogany. It shines unnaturally as if already coated in blood.
After today, I'm just happy to be done with this.
So, you leaving then?
I finished what he paid me to do. Why would I stay?
I think he has plans for you. Might even offer you steady employment.
I don't care. I'm getting as far away from this place as I can tomorrow.
Alright? In the morning then.
Alright.
David finally looks away, trying to ignore his creation when he spots something over the trees to the east. It looks like a thin smoke trail again. He says nothing this time, but Morris notices him watching it. Eventually, he looks away and pulls out his cell phone. He turns it on and begins flipping through the settings again, clearly perturbed. Morris continues watching him, keeping an eye. We then move to the interior of the Caldwell house in the hallway. From a hand stirring a spoon in a teacup, we hear the sounds of footsteps as they clatter down the hall. When suddenly David steps into the frame, his phone still in his hands. He's clearly preoccupied with trying to make it work. He stops, however, as he looks up to see Kira sitting in the kitchen, stirring something in a cup.
Can I interest you in a cup?
Thanks, but I think I need something stronger tonight.
You just won't give up, will you?
I've been everywhere on this goddamn property and I can't find a single bar.
Like I told you, you're not going to. There isn't a cell tower 100 miles in any direction from here. You'd have to be touching clouds before you got... Sorry. You'd have to be touching clouds before you'd get a signal at this house.
He suddenly looks up as if she's just given him the secret answer to his problem.
You think that could work?
Could what work?
Elevation, if I got high enough. I saw some decent spots while I was on the lake.
That's not what I meant.
David puts the phone back in his pocket and begins putting his coat on.
Well, it's worth a shot. Morris said he can't drive me back out till tomorrow anyway.
With that, he heads back out the way he came, when Kira quickly leaps to her feet and follows after him.
David, wait.
She grabs a coat and makes her way towards him, moving off screen. We then move to the Caldwell house inside Aaron's room, where from the second floor, Aaron watches from a window as David rushes out the front door, followed by Kira. Aaron is holding an open book in his hands as he stares at the figures below. The right page of the book has a clear and obvious obsidian symbol scrawled on it. As the two figures move into the woods, Aaron shuts the book. We then move into the exterior of the woods. As the sun begins to set, David and Kira make their way through a snowy path. David trudges ahead, a clear goal in mind, as Kira struggles to keep up. She continues the conversation, desperate to convince him to turn back.
Hold on, this path isn't even cleared.
It's fine, I know where I'm going.
Just stop, please. Talk to me. What is this about?
The woman who drove me here, the one I've been trying to call, last night I saw something to her, happened to her in my dream. Something bad.
David.
Don't patronize me. When I get a feeling like this, I've learned to trust my gut.
I'm sorry that you're worried about her, but this isn't going to accomplish anything.
I didn't ask you to come. Go back if you don't want to be here.
That's not what I meant.
He moves off screen. She quickly rushes to catch up. We then move to a further spot in the woods. As Kira rushes to catch up with David, she stops. As she suddenly comes up on him, he's standing still in a clearing. He's staring at something close ahead, and as she follows his gaze to the remains of a large fire pit.
What's this?
I have no idea. It looks like a burn pit.
Yeah, Morris said something about one being out here.
Makes sense. Mr. Caldwell likes to get his hands dirty when he's outside.
They both walk around looking at piles of ash and bits of discarded debris, scraps of burnt clothing, before David finally bends over as he spots something on the ground. Kira stops as well as he fishes around for a moment before holding it up. We see him holding a dog collar in one hand. David reads the name on the tag as a confused expression spreads across his face.
What is it? What does it say?
He slowly turns to face her, the collar in his hands. He holds it out for her to see. As we see the name on the collar reads Samson. She looks down at it, clearly not recognizing the significance.
It looks like a dog collar.
David stands up, his sudden anger radiating off of him like an aura of pain. He moves closer to her. She instinctively backs away.
This is Samson's dog collar. Iris's dog. My friend's dog.
How do you know that? Maybe it's just a dog with the same name.
This was just made for him. It's barely got a mark on it, so what the hell is it doing in a fucking burn pile in the middle of the woods?
She puts her hands up reflexively.
I don't know. I'm sorry. I promise you I'm not lying.
David grabs her by the shoulders, looking into her eyes with a crazed expression.
Swear to me you're not lying.
David.
Swear it!
She looks away, her eyes closed. She seems frightened.
Okay, all right. I swear it.
At that, he steps back, seemingly satisfied for the moment. David looks down at the collar again, trying to piece together the puzzle.
She would never leave him, and he would never leave her. So if he's out here, then so is she.
He looks around at the surrounding woods for a moment and then picks a spot and starts trudging through the snow again, trying to find his friend. Kira quickly chases after him, trying to get him to calm down.
Wait, David, stop.
He ignores her at first, but she charges ahead and stands in front of him, forcing him to listen.
Listen to me. If we talk to Aaron, I'm sure we can set up a search party or whatever we need to do, but we're not going to do anyone any good looking for someone in the dark. We need to head back.
David stares hard at the collar before looking up at the setting sun and finally turning towards Kira.
God damn it, fine, you win. But we call the police and come back here at first light.
Okay, yeah, that's fair, but now we've got to go.
David looks towards the remains of the burn pile for a final time before the two of them turn and head off screen. The remains of the burn pile, there appears to be bits of clothing and other items, including a half-burned pack of Iris's brand of cigarettes. We move on to the Caldwell house, outside night. The house has all the lights off as a slight fog rolls across the yard, reflecting the white moonlight from above. The only light source are candles placed in the windows of the house. We move into the interior of the Caldwell house. Nighttime entrance. David and Kira open the door and rush into the house. David's still holding the burnt collar. As they enter, they quickly realize none of the light switches work, and there are lit candles visible everywhere.
What the hell is going on?
I don't know, it looks like we lost power, but the generator should have kicked in.
It's automatic?
No, but Morris should have taken care of it.
They briefly look around, but it appears as if no one is inside.
Well, where is it? 'Cause it doesn't look like anyone's here.
It's in the barn. I'll go see if I'll go see if he's there. You should wait in case they come back.
Alright, just don't be gone long.
Don't worry, I'll be right back.
With that, she steps out the door and off screen. Looking through her window, David watches her go for a moment. He nearly turns away as she disappears from view, when his eye is suddenly drawn to the building in the distance, the obsidian building. It appears to have power, and there is a light shining from inside. He stares in disbelief for several seconds before turning to leave the house. Cut to Caldwell house, outside night. David makes his way through the field, holding the candle out in front of him as a ward against the darkness. His boots trudge through the thick, crunchy snow while the freezing winter wind whips at his face. He urgently pushes through the low fog that gathered as he presses forward towards the obsidian building. Finally, as he reaches the main door, his progress is halted as he looks down at the handle. A small padlock is on the metal handle. David reaches down and grabs it, holding it up to inspect it. Cut to inside the obsidian building. Through the wide open room in the main area of the obsidian building, there is a creepy stillness in the air as the soft hiss of the winter wind are heard whipping at the building's exterior outside, when suddenly, inside the door flies open as David kicks it with his boot. David stands in the doorway, candle in hand, with the moonlight at his back. He takes a moment as he searches the place with his eyes. as they're immediately drawn to the main source of light in the room. He steps inside, makes his way towards a window, where he looks at the strange setup. A single lamp has been positioned at the window, pointing out like a spotlight. After a moment, he pulls the lamp back and aims it into the room before finally stomping back to shut the door. As the door is latched, he turns to face the room again. With the door closed, he could now hear the thin sound of a generator from somewhere below. The lamp light is thin and only gives direct beam in one direction. Even with its help, most of the room is still in shadow. David steps forward anyways, making his way towards the back as he calls out.
Hello?
David moves deeper into the building, occasionally calling for Aaron as he does.
Mr. Caldwell?
As he gets progressively further in and through a mixture of the lamp and his candle, he sees the strange furnishings in the room, a small library of books, along with maps and strange-looking devices. David spots one of Aaron's self-help books and scoffs as he picks it up. He briefly looks at it before he is distracted by something he spots hiding underneath it. He reaches down to pick up a cut-out newspaper clipping. The article is about his childhood home burning down, and clearly shows a picture of David with his parents under a caption that reads, "The Camp Family."
The fuck?
Brushing things aside on the desk after reading the article, he finds more strange items, several personal family pictures of him when he was young. He continues moving these things around until he finds a brittle page, clearly cut from some ancient book, that has an image scrawled on it. David takes a deep breath as he stares at the image, his eyes slowly drifting towards the identical-looking birthmark that he shares on his arm. He drops the picture, stepping back away from the table. His breathing is shallow as he desperately tries to make sense of what he has seen, until suddenly, David slips on something.
Oh, god damn it.
As he gets to his feet, he searches for what made him fall, and he finds a latch on the floor. On closer inspection, he sees that he tripped over part of the rug, revealing a hidden latch to a trapdoor leading into a basement. Cut to interior obsidian building, basement continuous. There's utter stillness in the darkness of the basement, broken only by the small guttural noises of a small generator, purring somewhere in the dark. Creak. David throws open the trapdoor. Thin drafts of light cast down into the darkness from the open door above. Almost immediately, David turns away from the hole as a hard stench hits his nostrils.
Jesus, god damn it.
He takes a deep breath away from the hole and then tries calling down into it.
Is someone down there?
David waits several moments, and after hearing nothing, he makes a decision. He finds a piece of cloth in the room above and tears it off to make a makeshift mask against the smell. He then makes his way down the ladder and stands at the bottom, illuminated only by his candle and the whispers of from the light above. Whispers of light above. He holds it out, squinting his eyes as he tries to adjust. After a moment, he makes his way towards the sound of the generator. Squish. You.
Oh, god damn it.
Something squelches beneath his feet as he moves. The ground feels more like mud than anything solid. As he finally reaches the generator, it is relatively small, and as he inspects it, he quickly realizes it's running on its lowest setting and nearly out of gas. After a quick search, he discovers a full gas can nearby and fills it. He then flips the switch to its highest setting.
The light begins to grow brighter as the generator revs with more power. As the room fills with light, suddenly revealing all its hidden secrets, David is blinded at first by the sudden intense light, but as his eyes slowly adjust, he sees the cause of the wretched smells. Several naked bodies lay stripped and rotting, unceremoniously laid to rest in shallow graves dug into the mud floor. The first body he sees is one of the workers he recognizes, the one with the bloodied knuckles. As he stumbles forward, barely able to comprehend what he's seeing, he spots it. Thick, clotted fur of a large dog laying in the mud. As David falls to his knees beside the body of Samson, he spots something even worse. Lying in a separate hole beside the dog, he spies the remains of Iris, her head barely sticking out of the mud. Resembling her appearance in his dream, she's splayed out beside her, still together in death. Without a word, he slowly, patiently wipes the mud away from her face. It's only then he notices how badly damaged all the bodies are, each missing large chunks of flesh and all badly decomposed. He gently pats Samson's head as tears begin running down his face. The only words he can manage come out in a whisper.
I'm sorry. Oh God, I'm sorry.
With the loud roar of the generator and his agony in full force, David doesn't hear the sounds of footsteps entering the building. He doesn't hear them coming down the ladder, and he doesn't hear them as they approach directly behind him. It's only when they're standing in the mud directly behind him that he turns to see the face of Morris. And before he can even move, with one swift blow, Morris knocks David unconscious in an instant with the blunt end of a hammer. We then cut to black, and in an instant, we are in the Camp family home when David was a child. He lies awake in bed and then sits up, soon begins staring into the darkness of the hallway through his open bedroom door. The darkness inside the hallway looks like an otherworldly kind of ethereal sort. He continues to stare, silently waiting, listening as the familiar whispers begin speaking to him.
Gegenwart vom Lager, Ari und Gift.
The child pulls back his sleeve and begins unconsciously rubbing at his arm, at his birthmark. After some time listening, David climbs off his bed and makes his way into the darkness where he disappears. We then move back to the Obsidian building. Like a drug-fueled trip, haze rises into the air as an unconscious David is shown tied to a chair in the center of the room. As if suctioned back into his body from somewhere else, David comes to, coughing, confused and completely lost. Almost immediately, he realizes he is bound, sitting upright in a wooden chair. In front of him, smoke rises into the air from candles, and he can just make out the form of Kira, also tied to a chair. He blinks as he stares at her, trying to make out her condition. Her eyes are closed, and she isn't moving. His voice is scratchy, his speech slightly slurred as he tries to get her attention.
Kira, hey, can you hear me?
He clears his throat while he attempts to orient himself, but suddenly he hears something nearby, somewhere behind him. Large, rusty sounds like a heavy door opening and closing after several moments. The sounds are followed by slow footsteps. They approach from behind until David sees a familiar face as Aaron steps in front of him. He tries to focus, though he's still out of it, still groggy and barely there. A thin trail of blood slowly sliding down the side of his head.
What is this?
It's difficult knowing where to start.
Is she alive?
She is, for the moment.
You son of a bitch. Did you kill them? Everyone down there?
Not personally, but it was my decision.
Why? Why would you do that?
It wasn't a choice I made lightly, but I couldn't risk anyone knowing where you were. I did ask you to come alone.
As Aaron finishes his sentence, David flinches from the words, beginning to feel the weight of what he's done. He can't meet Aaron's eyes, and instead, he continues to stare at the floor.
David, two souls barely nudge the scales and weighed against the weight of our purpose here.
Aaron leans forward, now whispering to David.
Do you still want to know what I found under the lake?
Slowly, David looks up, his expression empty, except for the smallest glimmer of curiosity, still shining somewhere in the back of his eyes. Aaron smiles as he sees it.
I know you have no idea where we sit right now, because there are few who do anymore. So let me enlighten you.
Aaron stands up, walking to a window and looking out at his farmhouse.
We stand at the precipice here. Somewhere beneath our feet lay the gates of Riley, land of gods, so old they predate the concept of time. And if that door could be found, if it could be opened, we could have a chance to gain an infinitesimal fraction of knowledge from these old ones. But even with a fraction, the boundaries of this world would cease to exist. Do you understand what that means?
Aaron looks half mad as he stares at David, waiting for his response.
Not really, no.
It means death would no longer be an obstacle. It would become a mere nuisance, something to be cured, like a disease. We would become endless, and those we love would no longer be lost to us. We need only take that next step.
Now you really sound like a self-help guru.
I don't need you to believe me, David. I just need you to remember.
Aaron suddenly stands up, slowly, gracefully. He raises his hand, making a gesture to someone in the darkness. Within a few moments, a sound begins emanating from out of it, as a tape player begins to play.
What is that?
David struggles with his bonds as Aaron moves away towards the back of the room, disappearing into the darkness for a moment. He frantically begins looking around, searching for him. Suddenly, he begins noticing the things taking shape in the darkness, things that move just beyond the border of shadow, things you only catch in the corner of your eye. He doesn't know whether they're real or hallucinations.
I know why sleep brings you no peace.
There's a scraping sound like metal on metal. As David looks around nervously, his fear begins to snap him out of his delirium.
Caldwell, what are you doing?
What's necessary to make you understand you were born with a purpose, David? So few of us can ever truly say that.
The scraping continues along the ground as it grows closer, and then Aaron suddenly appears from out of the darkness with a can of gasoline in his hands. As soon as he sees the can, David begins to panic.
No, stop it!
Aaron steps forward, grabbing David's face for an instant as he speaks.
It spoke to you when you were a child. It guided you.
Aaron steps backward with the can, standing next to Kira.
It speaks to you still. I know it does, and it wants you to remember.
Without another word, he lifts it up and begins to dump it all over her.
Stop! Jesus Christ, stop!
He doesn't. He continues dumping the can as Kira suddenly wakes up, coughing and gasping for air. She's covered in the gasoline.
For the love of God, stop!
Kira, now awake, begins looking around, trying to take everything in.
David, what's happening?
Before he can answer, she turns her head to see Aaron above her.
Aaron?
He kneels down, gently touching her face.
Shh. It's okay. Calm down.
He turns to look at David as he speaks to her.
You're all right. Everyone has their part to play in this.
He smiles as he lowers his hand from her cheek and slowly turns to face David, who is now staring in terror as Aaron pulls a familiar Zippo lighter from his pocket.
You recognize this?
My lighter.
It is, yes. Do you remember where you got it?
My father gave it to me.
He did.
Yeah.
Are you sure?
Yeah, it was a gift, I think. I don't remember the specifics.
Oh, I think you do.
He steps back, still facing David. He moves to Kira's side and sparks it to life, holding it in front of her face. Kira, shaking uncontrollably, tries to move away from the flame.
Please stop.
Fuck, stop it! What are you doing?
David fights to free himself, now gaining a second wind as he frantically tries to get to her.
What are you afraid of, David?
If that catches, she's going to die.
So you're afraid she'll burn?
Yes!
I understand. I'm sure your parents were afraid to burn too.
David stops fighting, staring at Aaron in confusion as a slim part of his mind begins to recall something. He stares at them as trauma slowly forces the pieces together as we move to his original family home at night. Now a child again, he leaves his bedroom and enters the hallway, now dragging a chair behind him as he steps through the darkness without fear, guided by the whispers he hears ahead of him. He continues down the hall until he reaches the door. He looks up at it, so large in comparison to his small frame, and places the chair against the wall beside it. He then reaches for the handle and steps inside. We move to the interior of David's parents' room. Peter and Susan Camper sleep on the bed as young David steps into the room. He watches them sleep for a moment until the whispers speak again. He turns, following the voice to the bedside table next to his father, where he sees the same Zippo lighter. David picks it up, briefly playing with it and flipping it open. He turns while messing with it, accidentally knocking his elbow against the bottle of whiskey situated on the table. He watches as it topples over and lays on its side, spilling its contents out all over the bed, as well as partially covering his parents. He then stares at them for a moment as they stir slightly from the damp sheets. Before they can fully wake up or do anything to stop him, David ignites the lighter and lays it gently on the bed. He then turns, walking back towards the door of the bedroom, as he can hear his parents begin to wake and stir. The flames catch quickly as they stumble out of bed, desperate to understand what's happening. David doesn't look as he leaves the room. Instead, he simply shuts the bedroom door and places the chair against the knob. David sits against the wall, his blank expression on his face as he stares at his parents' door. The smoke grows thick as it begins to seep underneath the small frame. the crack beneath the door, and cries for help begin to turn into screams of agony, all while David sits and watches smoke slowly pool under the door. We move back to the obsidian building, where David stares straight ahead, the horror of these resurfacing memories clear on his face as Aaron smiles and sees it happen.
It's coming back to you.
It was me. I killed him.
You did?
Please, what are you doing? You can stop this.
Aaron gently touches her face.
Shh. We are not in control here. Haven't you realized that yet?
Jesus Christ.
Don't weep for them.
He gently strokes Kira's hair and stands up, facing David.
Everything that happened was preordained. You've never had a choice with any of it.
David looks up, staring at him with empty eyes.
What does that mean?
David, your will has never been your own. Because you were molded for a purpose.
What is it? What is my purpose?
Aaron smiles as he moves away from Kira, now standing between both of them. His eyes remain on David. He steps in front of him and loosens the bindings on his left arm, then grabs David's wrist and lifts it up, forcing him to look at his birthmark.
This is your purpose.
David continues to stare at his own forearm as Aaron backs away, nodding to someone in the shadows. David looks up as Morris steps into frame, holding a large knife. He fixates on the blade as Morris steps closer.
A gift you've carried your entire life, but never understood.
David flinches as Morris brings the blade up.
The old ones do not speak as we do, through spoken words and movement of the lips.
He braces himself for pain that never comes, when suddenly he hears a snick as Morris cuts the first binding off his right leg.
They speak through blood and bone, through pain, through sensation.
David opens his eyes to see what is happening as Morris cuts the final bindings off his right arm, setting him free from the chair.
If we wish to communicate with them, we must speak in their language.
David stands up, wary of Morris, who still stands in front of him holding the knife. As they stand eye to eye, Morris turns the knife around and offers the handle to him. David eyes it warily, unsure of what is being offered. He can still see Aaron standing beside Kira while holding the lighter. After a beat, in a moment of hesitation, he takes the knife. Morris steps aside, back into the shadows, allowing Aaron and David to face each other again.
We must speak in blood and pain.
David looks down at the knife.
What the fuck are you asking me to do?
Use the knife and remove the mark from your person.
You want me to cut it off?
I want you to make a choice.
David looks down at Kira, kneeling beside her. Aaron looks down at Kira, kneeling beside her, igniting the flame and bringing it as close as it can possibly go before touching her. While she sobs and closes her eyes and moves her face away from it.
Stop, please, God.
What the fuck is wrong with you?
It's your blood or her pain. Either way, they're going to hear it. So you need to choose.
Fuck you!
David looks to her. She's sobbing as she stares at him with pleading eyes.
David, please.
He holds the knife out, looking for her to his arm. And after a beat, Aaron moves again.
Well, that's it then. You forced my hand.
He ignites the lighter and moves towards Kira as she begins to scream.
No, no!
Wait!
Aaron stops.
Just wait. I'll do it.
He smiles.
All right, David, then do it.
David lowers the knife to his arm, his breathing becoming erratic, his body trembling all over.
Do it!
David closes his eyes, desperately trying to work up the will to plunge the blade in.
Or she burns, David!
With a final push, he finally drives the blade into his flesh and begins to cut.
Ah! Jesus! God!
The blade saws at the flesh around the mark on his arm. As the room is suddenly silent, David commits his act of self-flagellation, and everyone simply stares at him as the torturously slow act takes place. David sinks to his knees while he cuts and screams and cuts again, his face beet red from the exertion. Finally, David's hands, with one final tug, tear away the last strands of flesh, while still keeping the mark attached to his body. He holds it up with his fingers, covered in blood and viscera, breathing heavy as he stares at Aaron with cloudy eyes.
It's done.
Without another word, David falls forward, passing out from the pain. Aaron smiles, motioning for Morris to grab the flayed piece of skin. He steps forward, moving towards David's left hand. While David, you can clearly see his right hand closes on the handle of the knife. Morris approaches from the front, bending over to grab the mark from David's hand. The moment he bends down, however, turning his back to David to pick it up, David makes his move. and like a viper, his right hand comes up in one swift motion, driving the knife into Morris's neck. Morris reacts immediately, struggling with David and using his immense strength to pummel him in the face.
David!
David is weakened by this ordeal, but he doesn't relent, taking the hits from Morris while struggling with him on the ground. Eventually, he manages to pull the blade from Morris's neck and stab him again. As Morris grows weaker, David stabs harder and faster, now completely soaked in both of their blood.
Wow.
Aaron finally rushes towards the melee to try and stop it. Morris begins to lose consciousness, now bleeding out from his wounds as Aaron reaches them. He lunges for David, but David lashes out, slashing at him with the knife. The point strikes Aaron in the face, slicing open part of his eye, forcing him backwards. David stumbles to his feet as Aaron screams in pain, blindly fumbling around, knocking candles over as blood runs down his face. David holds his bleeding arm as he limps towards Kira.
Oh God, you killed him.
He begins cutting away her restraints as she weeps and mumbles about what he's done.
We have to go.
David uses his one good arm to help her up. She acquiesces as he does and gets to her feet.
Come on.
Holding each other up, David and Kira rush past the body of Morris and the still screaming Aaron. They make their way towards the door without looking back.
We need to get out of here. Where are the keys to get to the truck?
They should be in it.
Okay.
They fight their way forward as David desperately tries to ignore the whispering getting louder all around him in the darkness. David shuts his eyes against it as they see the truck in the distance. Cut to interior truck night. David opens the driver's side and gets in, while Kira opens the passenger side. They both scramble inside and David immediately begins searching for the keys. They both blow geysers of steamy white air against the cold as he frantically opens every possible spot inside the truck. As he does, Kira begins to speak.
I'm sorry that this happened.
He barely hears her as he tears through every location he can think of in the cab, until suddenly he is distracted by things in the darkness outside the windshield. The same shapes he'd seen in the obsidian building, now moving closer through the woods.
I really am. I never would have expected to like you this much.
David stares through the glass as the whispers grow progressively louder. Suddenly, something Kira says catches his attention, and he turns to look at her.
Wait, what do you mean?
The moment he turns in her direction, crack! A large rock smashes into the side of his face, hitting his temple and knocking him unconscious with one. Cut to black. Interior, David, unconscious, total darkness. We hear soft sounds of David breathing as everything remains completely black. This is followed by the familiar whispering in the darkness, now inside of him, surrounding him on all sides. Whispers.
Words that we will learn.
Sudden enormous inhale of a breath. There is a moment of silence, and then David opens his eyes. Hard cut. Frozen like David's structure, dawn. A sliver of dawn has crested the sky, passing thin streaks of frozen blue light above the pale lake. Blood trickles down David's face, across his brow, and splashing his eyes with streaks of scarlet. Again, he is bound. This time, however, he is stretched across his own creation. Unbeknownst to him, when he built it, the plans were designed to perfectly house a human frame atop it. He is stripped nearly nude, only wearing his underwear in the frigid temperatures. He blinks, shivering, as he sees for the first time the two figures standing across from him on the ice, Kira and Aaron, though both are masked and unknown to David. Both of them wear robes, and have donned the strange mask he's seen upon his arrival in the Codwell house. Neither move as David begins to struggle against his bonds, only now realizing how tightly bound he truly is.
The fuck?
David struggles against his bonds. The figures move to either side of him as he works himself into a frenzy.
God damn it!
He looks to his left, looking to the smaller of the two figures.
Kira, please. Kira, is that you? Kira, please, help me.
The smaller figure stands to the side of the structure, refusing to look at or acknowledge David. The taller figure stands on the opposite side, whispering a chant of some kind with his hands outstretched towards the hole in the lake.
Allegin Nugel Naghai Noggin Bognor Poof.
The structure is positioned facing the lake, so David has a clear view of the hole as Aaron steps aside and the water beneath it begins to boil, turning black.
What are you doing? What is that?
The black water begins to bubble up onto the surface of the ice. David watches, transfixed, as Kira steps in front of them and brandishes a knife. The wind begins to pick up as she steps forward. David staring at her in total shock. She leans in, lifting the mask only slightly, and whispers to him.
I really am sorry, but I have to see my sister again.
In the instant after she speaks, she leans in and kisses him on the lips, an apology and a decision, each followed by her hand plunging the knife into his stomach. As she pulls away from the kiss, a spastic heavy cough leaves his mouth, accompanied by a thick spray of deep red blood, arterial blood, that splatters across her mask. It dribbles down her chin as he looks in disbelief at his wounds.
His chin.
His chin, I'm sorry. Down his chin.
She stabbed herself.
Sorry, his chin.
I just imagine the blood and then just ripping down.
It dribbles down his chin as he looks in disbelief at his wound. But before he can comprehend what he has seen, she drags the blade up, causing him to scream in agony.
Ah!
She hacks and carves as Aaron continues his chanting, all while David's screams grow quieter and eventually stop altogether. When she finally finishes, she steps back, looking at her work. The obsidian symbol is carved into David's torso. Hanging on to his life by less than a thread, David's head lolls to the side, and as he stares up the sky, he is the first to notice the changing colors of the dawn, and they shift from...
You just skipped to the middle of the script.
Did I?
Yep.
As they shift to a morning blue, a violent red and orange, Kira follows his gaze, turning to stare at the sky, and Aaron soon follows.
After a moment, they both turn back to David, each staring at his mutilated form for several seconds. David stares past them at the blackened waters and the burning colors in the sky above, when suddenly he hears the whispers again, now closer than they've ever been before. But this time, something is different. The words begin to shift in meaning as he listens. Wild and Gal Shagog. He slowly begins to understand. I wait to eat the world. As the light begins to fade from David's eyes, a smile slowly crosses his lips, and he begins to laugh. It is only a short, painful snickering, but it lasts for several seconds. On David's face, as he stares straight ahead, belting his hysterical, dying cackle, his eyes full of a despotic, anarchistic hatred for human stupidity, fueling his final deep-seated gallows humor, as he laughs at the end of the world, when suddenly the lake begins to crack and split apart, pieces falling and collapsing in on themselves, as a now deceased David looks on, a dead man's smile stitched across his face. Cut to black.
The end.
The end.
Thank you for watching.
I thought I was gonna walk out for a second. Just like, thanks for watching, I'm done.